In this video, I want to talk about fretboard mapping. This is something that you can do in order to learn new patterns on the guitar, and it's very helpful in order to create visual aids for you to use while you're practicing. If you're learning new chord inversions, having a visual aid in front of you is going to make it so much easier than trying to memorize them right off the bat. Eventually you will memorize them, but having a visual aid is super helpful. So I make fretboard diagrams for a lot of the lessons that I release and also for my own personal use. So I want to show you how I do it on my computer, and I want to provide you with a PDF of everything we go through today and some blank diagrams at the end of that you can print off and draw your own diagrams for whatever you happen to be working on. This is going to help you gain a better understanding of the guitar neck. It'll also help you make sense of some areas of the neck that might have been unclear or difficult for you. And it's going to help you realize that there are a finite number of possibilities for any given pattern on the guitar. It can seem like there's no end to all the patterns that you could learn, but the truth is there's only a certain number of ways you can play a G major chord. Yes, there's a lot of options, but there's a finite number of them. And so when you can map it all out for yourself, you can actually look and see what is actually possible. So I want to help you to get acquainted with fretboard mapping and hopefully give you some tools that are going to help increase your understanding of the guitar and make you a better player overall because of your understanding being deeper. So I'm going to share my computer screen and we're going to look at the program that I use to create diagrams. Okay, here we are. And this is the program that I use to create fretboard diagrams. It's called Neck Diagrams 2. It's a great program. I definitely suggest it if you want a computer program that you can use for this, but doing it by hand works just as well, and I've done a lot of that in the past. The first thing that I want to cover with this is simply an illustration of the tuning of the guitar. This is a very important piece to really wrap your head around. If you vaguely understand the way that the guitar is tuned, specifically the intervals that the different strings are tuned to, such as 6th to 5th string, 5th, 4th, and so on, that is going to help you to be able to navigate creating different patterns and understanding the intervals between them, and it's going to make it so much easier for you to create your own fretboard diagram. So I'm just going to do a quick demonstration of the way that the guitar is tuned to give you a great visual aid of these patterns. So we have our open strings, E, A, D, G, B, E. The interval between each of these is a perfect fourth, E to A to D, D to G, and B to E. But G to B is a major third. So a major third is 1/2 step smaller than a perfect fourth, and we'll demonstrate that with all of the notes leading between each. So if I enter these notes here, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, I hit A here at the 5th fret. So I've moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half steps from E to get to A. This A is the same exact A in the same octave as the open 5th string. So that means that from E to A here is a perfect fourth. This is the same thing as going E to A here. So I think that this is a very helpful way to see the tuning of the guitar. And one of the tricky things about guitar is that we have a lot of options for different notes. We can play A here or A here. It's the same octave. Same thing applies as we go up the 6th string. We have a second way to play all of these notes. We can play B here or here, C here or here, and that goes on. So it can be a little bit tricky in that regard because there's duplicate notes. But understanding these intervals is just going to really help you understand the structure of the guitar and how you can use it all to your advantage. So if we go up from the A, the open 5th string, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp or D flat, and then again the 5th fret is D because A to D is a perfect fourth again, 5 half steps. We can do the same thing from D D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G on the 5th fret is the same as the open 3rd string. From G, the open 3rd string, we go G sharp, A, B flat or A sharp, and then B is the 4th fret. And here's a great demonstration of the difference in the tuning of the 3rd to the 2nd string versus all the other strings. You can see that each of the other strings so far has 5 steps from the open string below to the open string above, 5 half steps. G to B is only 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. And that makes patterns on the guitar a little bit tricky because you're always adjusting when you get to that string. So you're adjusting when you're going from the 3rd to the 2nd string, changing your chord shapes or your scale shapes. You're going to be making adjustments constantly for that. But here we're at B, we're going to go C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then E on the 5th fret again, because B to E again is a perfect 4th. So here is the visualization of the open strings. I'm going to try to make this as visible as I can, nice and big. So this is a fantastic way to visualize the tuning of the guitar because we can see that we have the same spacing between almost all the strings except the 3rd to the 2nd string. If I were to add the notes on the 1st string just to make it kind of rounded out, I could do that, but let's leave it like that. And I'm going to name this, okay. And now let's take a look at the next kind of pattern we're going to cover, and that is going to be a scale. Okay, so here we're going to look at just an E minor pentatonic scale. And what I have written up here is the interval relationships of the different notes in the E minor pentatonic scale or in any minor pentatonic scale. These are objectively, they're applicable to any pentatonic scale. This is essentially the formula. I've got minor 3, minor 3rd, which is an interval movement of 3 half steps. W is for whole step, minor 3rd, whole step. If I start on the open 6th string and with E, I'm going to move a minor 3rd, 1, 2, 3 frets, 3 half steps. Just as a note, each of these indicates movement. So the first movement is a minor 3rd, the second is a whole step, minor 3rd, whole step. So from here, I went a minor 3rd, so I'm going to go a whole step, and then a whole step, and then a minor 3rd, and a whole step. And this is an E minor pentatonic scale on the 6th string only, single string scale. I'm going to map this out for all 6 strings. So if I go to the lowest note on the 5th string, I've got A, and this is same as here, so that where in this pattern here, this would be after the minor 3rd and the first whole step of this pair here. So I would go from there, a whole step, minor 3rd, whole step. So whole step, minor 3rd, whole step. Then I'm going to be back at the beginning of the pattern. I'm going to move a minor 3rd and then a whole step. So this is an E minor pentatonic scale on the 5th string. And you could start it here at E and play E, G, A, B, D, E, and that would be an E minor pentatonic, but it goes from A to A. That doesn't change what scale it is. It's still E minor pentatonic because it's that specific set of notes. Next we're going to go to the D string, and this would be right here in our pattern, moving a whole step and then going back to the beginning. So a whole step would bring us to E, then we got a minor 3rd, a whole step, and a minor 3rd. So already you might notice there's some familiar patterns here. If you know your 5 pentatonic shapes where we do 2 notes per string, we've got the bottom of all 5 shapes here. We're going to keep going. We've got G. That puts us right here after the first minor 3rd. So we're going to go whole step, minor 3rd, whole step, minor 3rd. And we're continuing to build our E minor pentatonic scale on each of the strings. Here we have B, that puts us right here. We've got to move minor third, then a whole step, minor third, whole step, and finally our first string is going to be exactly the same as the 6th string. So I can just do that quick. And now we have the entire fretboard up to the 12th fret mapped out for the E minor pentatonic scale. So what I can do here is look at the different two different ways of playing the scale. So if I have this full sheet in front of me, it might be a little hard to decipher what I can do with this. Well, I can go ahead and highlight the different 2-note per string scales. Here's our familiar shape 1 minor pentatonic shape. If I get rid of that, I can do the same for each note of the next shape. This would be shape 2 of the minor pentatonic. I could do the same for shape 3 or shape 4 or shape 5. And so with this one pattern, with this one fretboard diagram, I've mapped out all of the possibilities for the pentatonic scale in one octave. I could, of course, continue. I could make it bigger and go into the next octave, but I'm not going to do that right now. But one thing we can do is look at some possible alternative shapes other than your 2-note per string shapes. You could, for instance, do a 3-note per string. So I would do 3 notes on the 6th, 3 notes on the 5th, 3 notes on the 4th, and so on. This is a possibility. If I wanted to finish out that whole scale, I would need to add some. Why don't we do that real quick? Just added some frets here, and I'll quickly add in the notes that are going to be repeating notes from the initial octave, so we can finish this shape here. So we've got 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes. Here we've got our 3rd note, and then from there. So this is a way that you could play the E minor pentatonic scale, and I just went in sequence choosing to do 3 notes per string instead of 2. This shape is one that may be a little more tricky, but by doing things like this, you might find shapes that you really like and work really well. We're going to change these all back. And of course, you can do 3-2 patterns. That's one of the best patterns, that the ones I like the most. These 3-2, doing 3 on one string, 2 on the next, 3 on the next string, 2 on the next, and so on. Those patterns are fantastic, and by having this full diagram drawn out, you could figure out interesting different ways to play these pentatonic shapes, or any scale. It applies to every scale, and that'll bring us to our next diagram we're going to do, which is a major scale. We're going to do an E major scale. We're going to do E because it's easy to fit in on the fretboard diagram. It starts in the open strings, and so it's easy that way. But of course, you can do this for any of the keys. So we're going to do the same exact thing we did for pentatonics, but for the major scale now. So major, we've got, oops. Let me do this quick, actually. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And so, and of course, my key commands, I don't want to type those in to the text. Okay, so we've got E, we go whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If we start from A, we are right after this half step, so we go whole, 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 half. And then our pattern starts over, so we go whole, whole, half. I'm just going to end it at the octave. Next note in the E major scale, closest to the open D, is D sharp. and that's the 7th of the scale, so we're going to go half, and then our pattern starts over. Half, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And then we have G sharp, that's the 3rd of our pattern, so we got to go half, whole, whole, and so on. And then we're back at the beginning, whole, whole, half. Then we have the open B, which is the 5th, so that's going to be right here, moving a whole step, half step, and then starting the pattern over. And then we have the 1st string just like the 6th string. I mean, I can add these too because why not? So the same thing we did with the pentatonic scales we could do with these. So I'm going to fill in the typical scales that the way I learned them, which was 3 note per string. I'm not partial to that. I actually these days prefer the in position scales, which I'll show too, but I'll start with the 3 notes per string just to demonstrate how you could use this to figure out your scales. So here we've got a 3 note per string scale pattern. E major starting from E. Your highest note is A. If I wanted to do my in position scale instead, I would do those notes. So I would have, instead of playing that, I would play B on the open string here, and that would bring me into an in position shape, which I prefer over the 3 notes per string nowadays, just because I like the way it feels to stay in one position and not shift. If I want to shift, I can do that. I can do that anyway. So that is just the E major, but then you have the opportunity in the same fretboard diagram to look at any of the other shapes. So we could start from F sharp, from the 2. And we could look at this as just an E major scale starting from F sharp. Or we could look at it as the F sharp Dorian mode, which, if you know that word, Dorian, it's simply the name of the 2nd mode, which means it's the name of that we call the scale of E when we're focusing on F sharp as our new root note. So a mode is just focusing the root note onto a different scale than a different note than the parent scale. So it's an E major scale because the notes are E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. But when you start on F sharp as your home note, that becomes a different mode of playing in the parent scale of E. So often you would play that over an F sharp minor. Anyway, so we've got our F sharp Dorian scale right here. We could do in position or 3 notes per string, just doing in position here. So here you have an F sharp Dorian scale or just an E major scale starting from F sharp. And you can, in the same way, go through all 7 positions of the E major scale doing that exact same thing. And then that'll allow you to learn all your scales. And of course, perhaps you know all of the different positions of the major scale, perhaps you don't. If you do, you can of course use this for any other scale. So for arpeggios, we can do exactly the same thing we did for scales, just omitting certain notes. So if we know the theory behind arpeggios and chords, we know that we've got our 1st, 3rd, and 5th of the scale. So I could just take all these notes from the E major scale and delete the ones I don't need, but I'm just going to draw it out on each of the strings afresh. So we've got E, G sharp, B, and E. I'm just going to do a triad. B is the 5th, E root, G sharp, and I'm going to change this fretboard to intervals so you can just see the numbers because I think that's easier. So now we've got the intervals. Here we go. 1, 3, 5. We got 3, 5, 1, and then we have 5, 1, 1, 3, and 1, 3, 5. So again, you've got this this large picture of all the strings. It's an E major arpeggio on all 6 strings. And ways that you can use this, you can pick little fragments, like let's say you want to take these 3. Well, that's an E major arpeggio. It's 1 octave of it, and it's a simple shape, and it's a great one to master. You could continue on up the shape. You go 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. That's 1 arpeggio you could play. Or when you get here, you could go 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5 with the same finger shape for each octave. Shifting when you get to this 1, you could add on the 3rd octave, and now you have 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. A 3-octave arpeggio. There's so many ways to navigate through this, but having a diagram like this is just so important, so helpful. So if I were to go 1, 3, 5, 1, here's one of my favorite arpeggios to play, or arpeggio shapes. I go like this, 1, 3, 5, 1, then I go 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. So from here I move here, 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 here. And this is, I have my first finger here, 3rd finger, and then I bar my first finger here, 3rd finger, 1st finger, 2nd finger, 1st finger, 4th finger. And this is a great shape. I love playing that shape. And so that's another example of one you could play. You could also play, whoops, you could also play here and then go up to here. So really, you can do whatever you want. Once you have this basic fretboard diagram, you can figure out all the different chords and arpeggios that you can play. And this also, I should probably label this chords / arpeggios, since really these are all the shapes for E major chords as well. Now, if you look at these shapes, these are what I call the big 3. I have a whole course called Guitar Synergy that goes deep into the big 3, but a quick explanation of it here. These are close triad shapes that move across all 6 strings, not skipping any notes. So out of these shapes, I can create different chord shapes. I have, here's one E major triad. If I take that one out and put the one on top, here's another E major triad. If I do that and that, I've got another E major triad. And again, I can do it like this and play this E major triad. So this is big 3 shape 1, I call it. This is my naming system and concept. I know that other people use similar things, but this is how I think about the guitar and the fretboard. And so I called it the big 3 shapes because I didn't know of anybody else that had named this way of looking at the fretboard. But here is our second, well, this is actually would be shape 3, since moving up from root position would get over here. I'm going to go to shape 2. So this is shape 2, or first inversion. We have all these different combinations, 3, 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 3, 5, 1 again. But the nice thing is, anytime that you're building a triad, you can use any 1, any 3, any 5. So here's a triad, 3, 1, 5. It's a wide interval triad across skipping strings. That's a cool sound though, if you ever tried that. We have different options. We could do, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the other big 3 shape right here. So these are important shapes, but I can also combine them in different ways. Like I was saying, we've got 3, 1, 5. That's a cool shape right there. That one sounds great. And you may notice a shape like that you recognize, like a D shape. This right here. There's all these different combinations you can do, but as long as you've got a 5, a 1, and 3, technically it's a triad. And if you can reach it, you can explore playing it. Here's a cool one. I like that one, 153. So anyway, mapping out a chord that you're learning on the fretboard will give you all the possible options. One last thing to mention is that if you're inverting, let's say we're taking this chord right here and we want to invert it up, all we're doing when we're inverting is moving the note to the very next note in that chord on the same string. So that would be 1 to 3, 5 to 1, 3 to 5. So there's the next inversion of this chord. Next inversion of that right here. And that works for all the string sets, such as here, there's a second inversion, E major triad. If we move it up, invert it up, it's a root position E major triad. If we invert it up one more time, we've got a first inversion E major triad. So this diagram covers a lot for arpeggios and chords. Now I'm going to show you one last thing related to chords, and we're going to take the E major scale that we did up here and we're going to copy it. We're going to take all of these and make a new page with 5, just like here. Okay, and then we're going to paste all of these and add our root note. Root note, and we've got intervals. Okay, so this is again the E major scale on every string. So we've got all of the notes of the E major scale on all 6 strings, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to take a chord shape and move it through the chord family. And for the example, we're going to use the E major 7 chord with what's called a drop 2 voicing, or maybe this is a drop 3. I think it's drop 3 voicing. Doesn't matter. I'll show you what it is. It's this. If you E major 7 chord family. So it's this shape that you may know. This is a typical shape for the first 7th chord, major 7 chord that people will learn. It's a great shape. Just know that as I'm going through this, you can do this for literally any voicing, and you can figure out not only the whole chord family, but also all the inversions like we did with the triads. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight the notes in each of the chords. So this is the 1, 7, 3, 5. So that makes it an E major 7 chord. So to get to the next chord in that scale using the same exact chord arrangement, I just move each note of the scale up by 1. And now I've got the 2 chord, F sharp minor 7, which is the 2 chord in the key of E. And I'm just going to change the color quick so that it's a little more clear that we've got a different chord. Let's see how that looks. Ah, that's too, I can't see it. There we go. That's a little better. Then we're going to do the same here. So if we were to move each of these notes up by 1 scale degree, now we have the next chord of the scale. This would be a G sharp minor 7. Notice how this shape here and this shape are the same. Next, we're going to move it up again. And this is going to be the 4 chord, A major 7. Is that going to work? That's okay. Then, if we do it again, we move each note of that chord up 1 scale degree again. Here we have our 5 chord, B7, also known as dominant 7, in the nice salmon color. Then we do it again. We've got the 6 chord. This is, this is C sharp minor 7, the 6th chord of the E major scale. Now we'll do our last one here, And this is the 7th chord of the E major chord family, and this is a half diminished chord. It's D sharp half diminished. And now look at all these lovely colors. We've got the whole chord family using this same exact chord arrangement. So the intervals that are listed here are in relation to the E scale. However, if I were to change that, I'm not going to do that now, but you'd have, this would be the 1 of the 2 chord. And this would be flat 7, flat 3, and 5. This would be the 1 of the 3 chord, flat 7, flat 3, and 5. So basically the 1, 7, 3, 5 arrangement follows all the way through for all of these chord shapes. But because we're labeling them in the key of E, the intervals are all relative to the E root note. But that definitely is a helpful visual when you're learning these chords. You can of course do it with any other chord voicing and move it through the scale. I'm going to do one last thing, and that is to show just the inversions. And here we go. So same thing we did before, same chord. If I wanted to find the inversions of this chord, I could just do like we did in the triads and move each note of the chord up to the next note in the chord. So 1 goes up to 3, 7 goes up to 1, 3 goes up to 5, 5 goes up to 7. And I'm going to change color on that. And now we can see the inversion of our E major 7 chord. Whoops. Getting bonked around here. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is the first inversion of the E major 7 chord. If I want to do it again, invert up 3 to 5, 1 to 3, 5 to 7, and 7 to 1. Here I again have my inversion. Going to change the color to make it stand out. There's our second inversion of the E major 7 chord. This one is a bit of a stretch, but it's a nice sounding chord. And then we'll do it one last time for our third inversion. 5 goes up to 7, 3 goes up to 5, 7 goes up to 1, and 1 goes up to 3. And this chord is the proper inversion, but it doesn't sound that nice. I don't know. It can. It's context dependent, but the point of this is just to show you how you can figure out any chord inversion. And I've used this method to figure out some very difficult inversions, some which were playable, some which were not playable, but for example of like an extended chord, like a altered, like dominant 7, sharp 5, sharp 9. Went through and found some very dense, interesting chords by just going through this process of moving each note of the chord up to the next chord tone on that string. And then you can find all the inversions for any particular chord. Inversions. So that's all I wanted to cover for this video. I know that was quite a bit of information, but I think that when you learn to map out the fretboard in this way, it turns it into kind of a puzzle that you can figure out anything that you want. You could take a blank diagram, draw out all the notes in a particular key, learn that scale. You could draw out the notes in all 12 keys, learn all those scales. It's a great way for you to engage your mind and to create your own visuals in your own style that allow you to really practice and master all of these shapes. I've got these visuals that I created for you available to download. You can find a link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on my site, it'll be right below the video. And at the end of this PDF, there's, like I mentioned, some blank diagrams that you could print off and draw out some of your own fretboard maps for whatever you happen to be learning. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you found it informative and interesting, and that it helped you hopefully understand the patterns of the guitar in a deeper way.